Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into one of those mysteries that just grabs you and doesn't let go. You know, the disappearance of the Sodder children.
Mm.
Our source material is the Case File podcast episode about this case. And, oh man, it's a story that'll keep you guessing. 5 children vanished from their home in Fayetteville, West Virginia on Christmas Eve, 1945.
Wow.
And the mystery remains unsolved to this day.
It's fascinating how this case has resonated for so long, over 75 years later, and it still captures our imagination.
It really does. And the more you dig into it, the stranger it gets.
Yeah.
For those unfamiliar with the case, the Sodder family, George and Jenny, had 10 children.
Okay.
Picture it, Christmas Eve, 1945.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the kids are still up late, enjoying the excitement of the holiday. Around 12:30 a.m., Jenny wakes up to a ringing phone.
Oh.
A framed voice asks for someone who doesn't live there, then laughs oddly before hanging up.
Oh, that's creepy.
A little while later, she hears a thud on the roof like a ball rolling
Huh.
and thinks nothing of it at the time.
That small detail becomes a piece of the puzzle, later planting a seed of doubt. Was it just a prank call and a random noise, or something more deliberate?
Right, and then about an hour later, Jenny wakes up again, this time to the smell of smoke.
Oh, no.
George's study is on fire. They manage to get 5 of their children out,
Okay.
but the other 5 are trapped upstairs.
Oh, gosh.
The fire spreads quickly, and despite their desperate attempts, they can't reach the children.
The chaos of that night is palpable, even as you read about it.
Right.
They try to call the fire department, but the phone line is dead.
What?
The water barrel outside is frozen solid. George even tries to use his coal trucks to reach the attic window, but they won't start. It's a series of frustrating setbacks at the worst possible time.
And to make matters worse, the ladder that's always kept against the house, gone.
No way.
Later, they find it thrown down an embankment as if someone wanted to ensure it couldn't be used.
And that's just the beginning of the strange occurrences. After the fire dies down, they find something else. A pineapple bomb grenade, the kind used by soldiers during World War II near the house.
A grenade?
It seems likely that this was the source of the noise Jenny heard on the roof.
So we're talking arson. Someone intentionally setting this fire. But who and why?
The motive is one of the biggest questions. Before the fire, Jude had a few encounters that were, in hindsight, pretty unsettling.
Okay.
One was with a man who warned him that his new electric stove's wiring was faulty and could cause a fire.
Really?
It seems oddly specific, almost like a foreshadowing of what was to come.
Yeah, that's not your typical neighborly advice.
Eh.
Did they ever find out who this guy was?
Unfortunately, no. And then there was another incident this time with an insurance salesman who was furious when George refused to buy a policy from him. He actually yelled at George, saying his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. He even brought up Mussolini.
Mussolini. Now, how does he fit into all of this?
George and Jenny were Italian immigrants, and George was very outspoken against Mussolini. Remember, this is just after World War II. Emotions are still raw. Some people theorize that someone in the community, maybe someone who had lost family in the war, held a grudge against George for his views.
So we have a suspicious fire, a missing ladder, a grenade, and threats. It's hard to imagine this was just a tragic accident. But here's the question that haunts this whole case. If the children died in the fire, where are their bodies?
That's the crux of the mystery. The fire department searched the ashes but found no human remains. Their conclusion was that the fire was so intense it completely incinerated the children's bodies.
But the Sodders refused to believe that.
Really?
Jenny even did some experiments burning animal bones to see if they would be completely destroyed. They weren't. And a crematorium worker she spoke to confirmed that completely destroying human remains, even in a crematorium, is extremely difficult.
The lack of remains is definitely a major point of contention. It cast doubt on the official explanation of the fire, at least for those who believe the children didn't perish in the flames.
And then you have the sightings.
Oh,
Multiple people came forward saying they saw the Sodder children after the fire.
wow.
One woman who worked at a hotel in Charleston, about 50 miles from Fayetteville, reported seeing all 5 children with a group of adults, all seemingly of Italian descent.
Interesting.
She tried to talk to the children, but the adults were hostile and wouldn't let her get close.
This sighting is particularly intriguing because it suggests the possibility of a planned kidnapping. The adults' behavior, their Italian heritage, and the fact that they were so far from Fayetteville fuels speculation about who might have taken the children and why.
There was also a sighting at a tourist stop near Fayetteville on the morning of the fire itself.
Really?
A woman claimed she filled them breakfast and noticed a car with Florida license plates outside. Later on, there was even a reported sighting as far away as Cortez, Florida. It almost feels like someone was intentionally moving the children around, keeping them hidden.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? And then years later, there's the letter at a development that sent chills down my spine when I first heard about it.
Okay, tell me about this letter.
In 1968, Jenny received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man who looked strikingly like their son Louis, who would have been in his 20s by then. On the back of the photo, someone had written, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie boys, A90132 or 35.
Can you imagine being the Sodder family and receiving that letter? After all those years of searching a photo, appears a message that seems to confirm their son is alive. What did they do with this information?
They were convinced it was Louis. They hired a private investigator to follow up on the lead, but he disappeared and they never heard from him again. Another dead end in a case full of them.
It's incredible how much the Sodder family did to try and find their children. They hired multiple private investigators, put up billboards with the children's pictures, distributed flyers, chased every lead they could find. They even offered a reward for information.
Their determination is remarkable. They never gave up, even when faced with the indifference of the authorities. The police seemed content to label it a tragic accident and move on, despite all the evidence that contradicted that conclusion.
Speaking of the authorities, there's the strange incident with the fire chief, F.J. Morris.
Yeah.
He later admitted to burying a beef liver in the ashes and claiming it was a human heart.
What? Why would he do that?
His explanation was that he wanted to give the Sodders some closure.
Oh.
But it just adds another layer of suspicion to the case. Was it a misguided attempt at empathy, or was he trying to cover something up?
His motives remain unclear, adding another layer of mystery to this already complex case. It definitely raises more questions than it answers. So we have this fire, possibly intentionally set missing children, a string of sightings, a cryptic letter, and a fire chief behaving very strangely. Where do we go from here? What else did the Sodders do in their pursuit of the truth?
Well, in 1949, 4 years after the fire, George decided to excavate the site where his house once stood. He had bulldozed dirt over the ashes, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was buried there, something that could help him understand what happened to his children.
And this is where they uncover those bone fragments, right? They do. They find several bone fragments that look like vertebrae. They send them to the Smithsonian, hoping for a definitive answer.
So did the bones belong to the children.
Here's where it gets even more complicated. The Smithsonian's analysis concluded that the bones were too old to belong to the Sodder children and showed no signs of exposure to fire. They suggested the bones likely came from the dirt used to fill the basement.
Another dead end. But if the bones weren't the children's, whose were they? And how did they end up buried at the site?
Those questions unfortunately remain unanswered. The bones themselves have disappeared, adding another frustrating layer to this already baffling mystery.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much to unpack. How did the Sodders cope with this tragedy? What are the leading theories about what really happened that night? We'll explore these questions when we return.
The impact of this event on the Sodder family was devastating. Losing 5 children on Christmas Eve, not knowing if they were dead or alive, that kind of trauma leaves scars.
It's almost impossible to comprehend, isn't it? To live with that constant uncertainty, never knowing what happened to your children. Did they ever find any peace?
They tried to rebuild their lives. George built a new house on the property, but the grief and the mystery lingered. Jenny wore black every day for the rest of her life, a symbol of her mourning.
That's heartbreaking. It speaks to the depth of their loss and how this mystery consumed their lives. It seems they never truly gave up hope.
They didn't. And as the years passed, they kept adding rooms to their house. Some people believe Jenny in particular was retreating from the world, creating a space where she could hold on to the memory of her lost children.
It's a poignant image, the house expanding along with their grief and their refusal to let go of the hope that their children might still be out there.
The mystery also cast a long shadow over their surviving children. They grew up with this constant weight of loss and unanswered questions. And Sylvia, the youngest, who was only 3 at the time of the fire, has continued to search for answers throughout her life.
It's a testament to the enduring power of family and the hope that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, the truth can still be found. Now let's shift gears and dive into some of the theories surrounding this case. What are some of the explanations that have gained traction over the years?
There's been no shortage of theories, but none have been conclusively proven. One theory that's particularly chilling is that the children were kidnapped by the Italian mafia, perhaps as revenge for George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini.
That adds a whole other dimension to this story. Was there any evidence to support that theory?
While George's criticism of Mussolini is well documented, there's no concrete evidence linking the mafia to the fire or the disappearance. It's a compelling theory, but without solid evidence, it remains speculation.
What about other theories? Were there any that focused on someone closer to the family, someone they might have known?
Another theory suggests the children were taken by someone they knew, someone who might have convinced them the fire was real and they needed to be rescued. This theory suggests the possibility that the children are still alive but have been kept hidden, perhaps out of fear or for some other unknown reason.
That's a difficult thought to process, the idea that they might be out there unable to return to their family. What about the official explanation? The faulty wiring? Did anyone seriously believe that after all the suspicious details came to light?
The official explanation of an accidental fire caused by faulty wiring quickly unraveled as more evidence surfaced: the missing ladder, the grenade, the threats, the lack of remains. These are hard to reconcile with the idea of a simple electrical malfunction.
So where do we stand? What's the most likely scenario after all these years?
That's the frustrating thing about the Sodder case. There's no easy answer. It remains one of the most perplexing, unsolved mysteries in American history. There's no smoking gun, no single piece of evidence that definitively solves the puzzle.
It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. We've uncovered so much information, so many twists and turns, but the core questions remain unanswered. What strikes you as the most compelling aspect of this case? What keeps people coming back to it, trying to make sense of it all?
For me, it's the resilience of the Sodder family. They faced unimaginable loss, dead ends at every turn, and a lack of support from those who should have been helping them, but they never stopped searching. Their story is a testament to the power of hope, even in the face of overwhelming darkness.
It's incredibly inspiring, but it also raises questions about the authorities' response to this case. Why didn't they do more? Was it simply incompetence or something more deliberate?
That's a question that continues to haunt this case. Was there something they missed or something they chose to ignore? We may never know for sure.
The thought that some answers might be better left buried is a chilling one. We might never know the full truth about what happened to the Sodder children. But their story forces us to confront the unknown, to acknowledge that sometimes there are no easy answers.
Exactly. And it reminds us that sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is to keep asking questions, to keep the memory of these children alive, and to hope that one day their story will have a resolution, even if it's not the one we expect.
Before we move on, I have to ask about the fire chief's actions. Why would he bury a beef liver and claim it was a human heart? It seems so bizarre and inexplicable.
It's a strange footnote in an already bewildering case. Some speculate he was trying to provide closure, albeit in a very misguided way. Others believe he might have been trying to cover something up to create a false sense of resolution and steer the investigation away from a more sinister possibility. His motives remain a mystery, just like so much else in this case.
It certainly adds another layer of intrigue. So far, we've delved into the events of that night, the evidence, the lack of remains, the theories, and the Sodder family's relentless pursuit of answers. But what about life after the fire? How do they cope with the years that followed, living with this gaping hole in their lives?
Well, they never truly moved on. The loss of their children remained a constant presence in their lives. They continued to search, to follow leads, to cling to the hopes that they might one day be reunited. It's a testament to their enduring love for their children and their refusal to accept the unknown.
It's an incredibly powerful story, and it's far from over. We still have so much to discuss, including the various theories about what might have happened to those children and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt this case. We'll delve into those topics when we return. We've spent a good amount of time going over this case, the fire, the missing children, the investigation or lack thereof. We've seen how the Sodder family never gave up hope, even when the trail seemed to go cold. Now let's consider something. What if we shift our perspective a bit? If you were investigating this case, what would stand out to you as the most crucial piece of the puzzle?
That's a great question. It's so easy to get lost in the details of this case, but for me it always comes back to the lack of remains. If those children died in the fire, there should have been something left behind. The fact that there wasn't, despite extensive searches and even an excavation of the site, raises serious doubts about the official explanation. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the fire wasn't the end of their story.
It's a chilling thought, but one that's hard to dismiss given the evidence. We've talked about several theories. The mafia, kidnapping by someone, even the possibility that they were taken to protect them from someone or something. Do any of these hold more weight for you than the others?
You know, it's tempting to try and fit the pieces together to come up with a definitive answer. But the truth is we just don't have enough information.
Right.
Each theory has its strengths and weaknesses, but none of them fully explain everything we know about this case. The mafia theory, for example, is compelling because of George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini, but there's no direct evidence linking them to the fire or the children's disappearance. Similarly, the kidnapping theories raise more questions than they answer. Who would take them? Why? And how could they have kept them hidden for so long?
It's like each path we go down leads to another dead end. Do you think we'll ever know what truly happened that night?
It's impossible to say for sure. Sometimes these mysteries are solved decades later, when new evidence emerges or someone comes forward with information they've held onto for years. But sometimes the answers remain elusive, and the mystery endures.
Even if we never have a definitive answer, the Sodder case reminds us of the importance of questioning, of not taking things at face value, and of fighting for the truth, even when it seems impossible to find. It's a story that stays with you, prompting you to think about the complexities of human nature, the enduring power of hope, and the possibility that some secrets may never be fully revealed.
Exactly. And it reminds us that sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is to keep asking questions to keep the memory of these children alive and to hope that one day their story will have a resolution, even if it's not the one we expect.
This deep dive has taken us down a winding path of speculation evidence and unanswered questions. We've examined the fire, the missing children, the theories, and the tireless efforts of the Sodder family to find their children. It's a story that leaves a lasting impression and prompts us to think about the fragility of life, the complexities of truth, and the enduring power of hope. If this case has piqued your interest, we encourage you to delve deeper into the available resources, examine the photographs, read the eyewitness accounts, and perhaps you'll uncover a piece of the puzzle that we've missed. Maybe, just maybe, your curiosity will shed new light on this enduring mystery.
Remember, the Sodder children's story isn't just a historical event. It's a reminder that even in a world saturated with information, some mysteries remain unsolved, and some stories deserve to be told and retold until the truth is finally brought to light.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive, where we uncover the hidden layers of fascinating stories and explore the mysteries that continue to intrigue us.